Hi, so relating to Audre Lorde, Zami, a new spelling of my name, I wanted to talk about Audre's relationship with her mother, and how, in my opinion, the personal aspects of it are far less important than the ancestral aspects. Rather than looking kind of at a Freudian style, how did having a feminist mother truly impact Audre's life as a lesbian woman? Um, I wanted to look at how Audre's mother coming from where she came from and immigrating to the United States, how Audre's mother coming from a place where loving women in a different way was accepted, is what Lorde is truly getting at rather than her personal experiences. So, two quotes that kind of help us analyze this are in the beginning of the book on pages 13 and 14. It starts with this now here was a space, some temporary abode, never to be considered forever, nor totally binding, nor defining, no matter how much it commanded in energy and attention. I think what she's saying here is that this home and these ideas of home uh, aren't forever because her identity is being shaped as her history progresses. At this point in her life, on page 13, Audre is focusing a lot on her mother's ancestry and ancestral history because that's how she's informing her identity. Seeing people, like on page 14, Madavine friending Zami, how Caracal women love each other is legend in Granada, and so is their strength and their beauty. So she's recognizing here that a foreign place offered a space for her identity to be accepted. And something like that exists, and something like that exists within her, something like that exists within her mother. And what does that say about the future? History is very important throughout the book. We see it in mentioning dates like Washington's birthday or President's Day, constantly talking about history and how the war is impacting her. And I think that this is really important because she is mentioning history because history is what's shaping her. The history of her mother, the history of her ancestors echo inside her bones, not only as a black queer woman, but as a black queer woman who is only first generation in the United States. She's looking at the history around her to see how is what's happening making me who I am, just how is where my mother came from informing this identity. And for me, rather than her mother and her family being this sense of home that she's talking about on page 13 and 14, it's this foreign land where Zami exists, where women loving women freely, and as the back of the book literally states, Zami, a Caracal woman, named for women who work together as friends and lovers, exist in real life. And this idea of history being home, rather, and history being the point of the novel, history informing identity, rather than these personal connections, is my argument. Because when we're looking at these connections, her with Ginger and her with her family and her sisters and all of these people, we see them as connections, and that is vital. And I mean, connections are important, especially for something that is called a biomythography, but it's also called a biomythography because it's following her history and how the history of her mother, the history that she's living in, and how these things impact who she is. We can even look at the cover of the book and we can see how the past here informs the present and how this movement equals identity. And I think that this is continued her as she creates her own version of Zami, her own world where women loving women is important, and she redefines that term. We see that on page 104 when she's talking about moving away. She says, "When I moved out of my mother's house, shaky and determined, I began to fashion some different relationship to this country of our sovereign. I began to seek some more fruitful return than simple bitterness from this place of my mother's exile." So she's seen, oh, my mother lost this ancestry. She lost this Zami. She lost this ability to love in a different way. And I'm going out to find that for myself, to create a new history informed by past history. rather than seeing this as a connection to motherhood and family. It's a connection to history and to ancestry. So that is my little argument. The relationships don't matter. It's all about where people came from in a much more longevity type of scenario.